Hi, I'm Dr. James Zanito. I'm in the Allen, Texas area, and I'm here to answer some of the questions that we've been receiving from many of our patients from all over the country and the world, and hopefully set some information straight about the current state of affairs in America with our virus situation. What we have here is a nutrition and drug pharmacy and multiple other disciplines in here. I personally have treated over 10,000 patients in the last 38 years, and another 4,000 or 5,000 have been here with all the other practitioners. So we do have a thing or two to contribute to, let's just say, the current panic and perhaps even paranoia that's going on in our country. I want to start with the testing mechanisms because everybody wants to know, do I have this virus? Am I a threat to someone else or even to myself? There is two ways of testing for infections. One would be looking at my immune system, the antibodies to that. And that test is out there, but it will only pick up prior infections and confuse it with current. So they're aiming to do the antigen, looking at the organism itself. But this is no ordinary organism. It's not a bacteria or something you can put stain on and look under the microscope at. This is genetic material. They're measuring RNA, a specific type of genetic material. But they have to capture it first. There's a reason they told you not to get tested instantly because you thought you'd been exposed, because they have to scrape in your nose, throat, and perhaps even rectally in order to capture enough of this genetic material. Therefore, if you test too early, you may come up false negative. It may need several weeks before symptoms arrive, and therefore you might have something that's transmissible and also capturable. So now we get some specimen and we have to go to basically only a few specialty labs in the country are running the test we're all using. Quest Labs, for instance, has to funnel all their tests to California. This genetic material is to be captured, stored properly, and then chain of custody, and very technical steps involved in order to say that you have some of this genetic material. What kind of genetic material? What we're talking about is the coronavirus family. The particular test we're using was developed and perfected during the SARS outbreak, which is a coronavirus, several years ago. This test is not going to tell you if you have the COVID-19, perhaps a weaponized version that is hitting and hit the Far East as it all initiated this crisis. And you may also be showing positive for a typical winter where 20% of us who get the, quote, flu-like problem has a coronavirus. So you have to decide for yourself, if I get tested and I'm going to be labeled now as having a coronavirus, are you sure you want to have that information because of the spectrum of possibilities that what it represents? But I want you to think about this. If you get that label on you, and forget about medical HIPAA privacy, this information always finds its way out, especially if there's hackers. Do you want to be labeled as a carrier now that may purposely restrict your travel forever in the future to certain places, or you may be monitored? You may not be able to ever donate blood again if you so inclined to do that. You also may have higher rates of insurance on any form of insurance because you have this signature on you, and you may have had it already from years back because you got through a simple virus, which the coronavirus family has always been until this showed up. So what we're going to talk about next is the risk factors and what are we really all panicking about. Next, we're going to talk about the risk factors. Now, how do we calculate risk? We can bring all kinds of variables into this equation. We can talk about the weather outside and the time of year, all the way to how close we are to each other, or what form of contact we have, whether we're sharing food or the food's cooked in the same kitchen. We can drive ourselves crazy with this science of epidemiology, and they are trying to use all of this mathematics and theory to bring some guidance as to what we're going to do with this particular infection. What we have to start with is what came out of China, and that information was all over the map. I saw stuff that made us think no one was surviving the virus, and I saw stuff that was even far less than what we have officially out of China right now. But we also now have information that's being gathered from all the other countries and using the test I just previously described. So what they're calculating is a morbidity and a mortality factor, and therefore how contagious is it and how lethal is this infection. So in any particular winter, we're going to go by what happens in America. you have great odds of not getting an infection in the wintertime in America. 80 to 90% chance of not getting sick because you did not let your immune system drop. And don't buy this that there's all kind of foreign viruses flying into America every year from the Far East with a new name on them, and that's where we have to have a vaccine to help save us. Our immune systems are dropping in the winter. Why? Well, we don't have anywhere near enough vitamin D, and it gets even worse. Let's celebrate with sugar and alcohol, stress ourselves out at the end of the year, get less sleep, and even especially how dehydrated we get because we're heating up our homes and the air is drying. Yes, dehydration is even worse in the winter. So we get sicker in the winter because we drop our immunity, not because some strong organism is suddenly thrust upon us, unless somebody purposely is doing that, and that's another lecture. So now we have this, okay, what happens every winter? 80 to 90% of us don't get sick? Well, that's not bad, but what if I do? How many people is that? That could be up to 50 million Americans might be sick during the winter months, but less than 0.1%. That means you have a 99.9% chance of not dying from an infection. So we accept that. That is the way life is. And those 50 to 60,000 that do die from influenza all the way to common pneumonia are elderly, weakened people dominantly, but they're across the spectrum. But we don't have a report every day in the news that says another 500 Americans died today from the winter flu season, because we would be in this same kind of panic. So we accept that. We accept those 0.1%. Why are we not accepting this? Because they tell us it's now 10 times worse. Well, that means we might be up to 1%. Some figures say some countries are having 2 or 3% chance of dying if you were infected. So we're starting to balance this out. Wow, we've got something here that we better perhaps contain before it gets to destroy the fabric of society and all of us get too sick. But if all of us are not going to get that sick, because we've already shown that, and we're still going to have 98 to 99% of us live through this, those of us who have taken efforts to try and stay healthy will definitely be in that group. We have to make a decision. How has society always functioned to maintain civility? It took thousands of years for us to all trust each other and to interact in all forms. And now we're going to break all that apart and bring every economy of the world to a grinding halt, bankrupting businesses large to small, so that we can save up to 1 or 2% if it were to get out to the entire world, even 1 or 2% of the world's population. That sounds like a noble goal, but people die by the millions all the time, every month in the world. That is a figure of 8-some billion populace. We have to make a decision. It's a tough one. When is enough enough? So countries are putting quarantines, but they realize you have to go to work in certain cases. You have to be able to go shopping. You have to be able to see your doctor. You need to be at your loved one's side if they die, instead of them dying alone because you might pick up an infection in there. And we need to get married. We need to have these ceremonies, and people need to have this decision. We always have, knowing that there were risks. So yes, this is a greater risk, but is the cure the destruction of the world's economy and every one of us having to rebuild from scratch and hope that social unrest doesn't become insane? Is that worth the level of panic that we're all showing? Or can we just do what the government is saying for now and just limit all the large social gatherings and let that be enough before we end up locking ourselves into our homes and looking out the window with a gun in our hands perhaps? So let's be sane about this thing, and now we'll talk about what you can do to have a perhaps healthy response to this infection should you get it. Okay, so what are we going to do about it? What is the remedy? We'll start with your own immune system. That's really it, is what can my immune system do for this particular infection, or any virus for that matter? It's been around for a long time, so how do we cultivate it? Let's go back to something like the bubonic plague. There was no antibiotics, no antiviral drugs, no testing, no communication the way we have today, and it basically had a massive course, but it ran its course. And the further the virus spread from the infection, I should say, not a virus, the further it spread, it got weaker because it was being altered by the people's immune systems, and antibodies were developing and attaching to it. But at the same time, a form of herd immunity was developing in people who had not been exposed to it. Still a phenomenon that might even involve quantum physics. Plants even show this, where a forest may suddenly have a new immunity to some form of fungus that's in an adjacent forest, and they have no idea how it knew it was coming. But this kind of thing happens. So the human race will get smarter as the immune system is going, and it's already finding more and more ways of defending itself as the virus gets weaker and tries to adapt, perhaps. But remember, there's no intelligence in a virus. It's not a conscious thing. It just has a program in it, and there's a certain amount of randomness to the genetics in here. So how do we cultivate our immune systems? Instead of building a bubble around us, build the bubble inside of your body. What are the boundaries? If you have open wounds, we know we keep that clean so we don't have that boundary broke. But the boundary is respiratory mucous membrane. So what is our normal defense? Body uses mucus, but having a lot of extra mucus is not a logical thing. We would therefore cultivate the antioxidants that are there. They have names like vitamin C, we know that one, and glutathione, a very powerful antioxidant. There's many other elements, but most of those will do a chemical job, kind of a biochemical warfare against any invasion. Even the strength of your stomach acid, of the organisms you capture, should die in the stomach acidity. Another reason why the elderly in nursing homes are so vulnerable, because their stomach acidity is barely a fourth of what it was when they were younger. There's a lot of reasons for that, but it shouldn't be. So let's look at a virus specifically. We have a remedy mechanism. The cheapest and the most predictable would be to use the amino acid lysine. This enables your proteins in your body to block the virus's ability to assemble proteins around itself. This is the akin of not being able to put your clothes on in the morning. You would probably not want to go outside in the world. A virus has to have a certain amount of protein structure around it, and this alters that so that it becomes very vulnerable. Lysine has a long history of being antiviral. People have used it for cold sores on their lips, perhaps, but it does work in any form of virus. The second one is vitamin D. Our government's been telling us we're all low in vitamin D for nearly a century right now, even mandated that be put in foods. Vitamin D, as viruses go, blocks some of the chemistry that the infected cells send out to purposely inhibit key parts of your immune system, basically called natural killer cells. The vitamin D will block that inhibition, and your immune system can see the trouble and respond to it appropriately. These two components are being used, I have personal knowledge of this, on some of our key air military bases to protect those personnel, except they're giving them those two elements by injection. You don't need to go that far. You can take them from any nutrition pharmacy, any health food store. The third part of it is, what if the virus does assemble and my immune system doesn't respond? Can I attack the virus specifically? And nutrition and natural remedies have always relied on a process called oxidation. Basically is, how do I break some of the bonds of the genetic code or the protein on the outside? And oxidizing agents are throughout our body, and we might be able to put some in. I'm not going to mention all of them here. Some of them are controversial, but high dose of vitamin C is an oxidizing agent. Iodine, everybody in surgery knows you paint iodine on an area you're going to do your work on because of its ability to literally kill almost anything it comes in contact with. Well, even a certain amount of iodine inside of you would work. Certain herbs have oxidizing properties as well. So there's a triad, therefore, of things that can be used that would cover most of the bases. But the starting point is to basically, the basic things that we have to correct from winter time in the first place. Let's stay hydrated. Let's stay mobile. Let's stay emotionally potent and less fearful and optimistic, so to speak. Let's not eat so much junk. This is not a time to hunker down in your house and drink beer and have sweets. We have to do, if anything, the opposite. We got to eat the healthy produce right now and have the foods that are rich in vitamins and minerals. Give your immune system a chance. More to come.